Author, Summer Sway. Last UPDA. Teddy slumped on the side of the road. My mind was blank except for the buzzing sound. I never really paid attention to my Instagram feed, but when I received a Venmo transfer notification from my husband, Spencer Freeman, I found it strange and decided to check what was going on Instagram. What I found waiting for me, though, made me sick to the stomach. Shannon Lambert was the college student Spencer had sponsored 8 years ago. Back then, I'd had an accidental miscarriage. Spencer, trying to do some good, claimed he was helping me by donating in honor of the baby. For years, I'd blamed myself, thinking it was my fault the baby was gone. It became my trauma, one that kept me from having another child even now. Staring at Shannon's profile picture, I realized it looked exactly like mine on Venmo. Spencer must have gotten it wrong. I took a deep breath and left a comment on her latest post. If you love him this much, why not just get married already? Barely half a minute later, Spencer's video call came through. His face was tense. He immediately started yelling at me, "Yvonne Sinclair, are you out of your mind? What the hell is wrong with you? Today's my birthday and Shannon sent me a gift early. I was just returning the favor." Was that comment really necessary? I looked at myself in the video. I was on but I looked like I'd aged years. It was almost laughable. I paused, then asked, "I know it's your birthday. Didn't I take time off to cook you a birthday feast?" Spencer frowned impatiently. "That buck's worth of food. The money for the groceries came from me. Don't act like you did it for me." I gave a bitter laugh. For the past 10 years, he'd always claimed the company was struggling, he couldn't get promoted, there was too much debt, and he had no money. So after work, I would stay up late writing web novels on the side. I even handed over most of my monthly salary to him. I had no money, but that was because I was supporting this family. But Spencer actually transferred Methasan dollars so casually just moments ago. Any fool could see that he'd been lying to me all along. The only one who'd been truly living in poverty was me. When he noticed that I had gone quiet, his tone softened, but it was laced with an almost imperceptible indifference. "Forget it. I know you just want what's best for me. Let's eat out today. I'll invite Shannon, and you can apologize to her in person. No need to buy groceries. By the way, transfer that $1,000 back to me." I took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tears that were welling up. How could I trust him? I composed myself and choked out, "Were you planning to transfer that $1,000 to Shannon for a handbag?" There was a moment of silence on the other end before he replied almost dismissively, "I'm just transferring it to her so she can post it on her feed. She's been trying to build her brand as an influencer. She needs to get attention. You wouldn't understand, so I didn't tell you. She'll send it back to me once she's done. Besides, it's not my money." His words made my skin crawl. Something about this didn't sit right. I intentionally cut the video and held the phone away. "I can't hear you. Hold on a second." As I said this, I turned on the recording feature and then reopened the video. "Okay, bad signal earlier. What were you saying?" He went on, "It's not my money. You know I don't have any. It's the company's money and I need to pay it back. You don't want me to go to jail, do you?" I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "So you're saying you're embezzling company funds just so Shannon could show off?" There was a long pause on the other end. When he finally spoke again, it was only to threaten me. "Listen carefully, Yvonne Sinclair. You'd better transfer that money back today or I'll divorce you." Author, Summer Sway. Last UPDA. Teddy replied flatly, "Fine. Let's get a divorce then." Before Spencer could fire back, I turned off my phone and blocked him on every platform. He wanted a divorce. Well, if that was the case, I might as well get back everything I had put into this marriage. I glanced at the time. Spencer should still be at the office. I had just enough time to swing by home. I rifled through every drawer and closet to search for the title deed. I wanted to secure the important things first before heading for the divorce. When I opened the deed, it felt as though my heart was tightly gripped by an invisible hand, making it almost impossible to breathe. This house was bought in our second year of marriage, and I had drained most of my savings to cover the down payment. At the time, Spencer swore up and down that all assets would be shared. He said it would be easier for him to handle the paperwork alone, so he put only his name on the deed. But now, there it was, his name alongside Shannon's. Shannon, it felt like a thunderbolt had struck me. When did they get together? This was supposed to be our marital property. I checked the date on the deed and found Shannon's Instagram post from back then. The caption read, "I have a home now. I'm so happy." So, everything had been planned out from the start. As I scrolled through her feed, all I saw was her flaunting her wealth. She looked like she had a perfect life. But how could a sponsored student have all this? I shoved the title deed into my bag frantically. In the process, I accidentally knocked over his briefcase and a promotion letter fell out. My hands trembled as I opened it, only to find that he had been promoted to business manager 5 years ago. But all this time, he told me he was just an assistant. Just then, my phone screen lit up. Spencer had used someone else's phone to text me. "Wait at home. I'm coming back soon." I didn't have time to clean up, so I grabbed a few important documents and rushed out. I never expected Spencer would be waiting for me downstairs, with a guilt-ridden Shannon trailing behind him. I gripped my bag tightly and tried to stay calm. "What are you doing back here?" Spencer's face was dark with frustration. "Do you know how busy I am? I had to come back because of your little tantrum. Making money isn't easy. Can't you be more understanding?" Shannon actually had the nerve to pull at my arm. As she flipped her hair, the diamond ring on her finger caught the light, practically blinding me. Smiling sweetly, she said, "Don't be mad, Yvonne. It's my fault. I didn't explain it clearly. Spencer gave me the diamond ring as a friend. I only posted it because I loved it." Spencer yanked her away. "Why are you apologizing? She's the one who owes you an apology." Shannon gave me a pitiful look. But looking at the two of them, I just felt disgusted. I turned to leave. Behind me, Spencer's cold voice called out, "Where do you think you're going? It's my birthday today. Shouldn't you be home making dinner?" I was so angry that I laughed. I stopped in my tracks. "Don't forget, we're getting a divorce." Shannon gasped in mock surprise. "What? Yvonne, if you divorce Spencer, where else are you going to find a man as good as him?" Before I could react, Spencer grabbed my bag and started walking out. "Didn't I say we'd eat out? Let's go." Inside my bag was every piece of evidence for the divorce. I had to get back what was rightfully mine. So, gritting my teeth, I followed him. At the restaurant, Spencer chose a table by the window. I sat quietly across from him, while Shannon cozied up next to him. When it came time to order, Spencer spent the entire time chatting with Shannon, completely ignoring me. Once the food was ordered, he lazily glanced at me. "What do you want to eat?" I forced a smile. "Anything's fine." Soon, the table was filled with fancy dishes, all seafood. Shannon smiled coquettishly. "These are all my favorites." As she said that, she peeled a shrimp and put it on Spencer's plate. He smiled indulgently and ate it. But back in the day, Spencer hated eating food someone else had touched. Noticing I wasn't eating, Shannon blinked at me. "Why aren't you eating, Yvonne?" I pushed my plate away. "I'm allergic to seafood." It had been 10 years, and Spencer still hadn't remembered that I was allergic to seafood. It seemed like he had just remembered. He picked up the menu to order more, but I cut him off. "Don't bother. Spencer, I came here to tell you that we're done." Author, Summer Sway. Last UPDA. Teddy turned to Shannon. "Some things can't be undone." Spencer stopped mid-motion and suddenly laughed. "Divorce? How could we possibly get divorced? We still have the mortgage and car loan to pay off. You're just going to walk away with a divorce? How selfish can you be?" It finally clicked for me. Spencer was hoping I'd bear the full load of the mortgage and car loan, while Shannon would enjoy everything that should have been mine. I stood up, grabbed the glass of water on the table, and splashed it in Spencer's face. "Spencer Freeman, do you think I'm an idiot? Or a pushover?" The other diners turned to stare at us. Spencer's face turned red as he lowered his voice and said through gritted teeth, "Don't push your luck, Yvonne. Also, you haven't returned me $1,000. You think you can just walk away like that?" I scoffed. $1,000? You've taken far more than that from me over the years. Just looking at him made me sick, so I quickly snatched my bag from beside him and stormed out. Since they had no shame, I would do everything I could to get my revenge. Once I was outside, I called Zion Latham, the CEO of Lionette Group. "Zion, there's something I need you to help with." He was my first love. After we broke up for trivial reasons post-college, I married Spencer. We hadn't been in touch since, to avoid any misunderstandings. Now, here I was, shamelessly asking him for a favor. There was a brief silence on the line before Zion immediately agreed. The next day, I took the day off from work and headed straight to Lionette Group. That was Spencer's workplace. Just as I was about to enter the building, someone grabbed me by the arm. "What are you doing here?" I looked up to see Shannon, dressed in a suit and wine-red pencil skirt, with her long, wavy hair cascading down her back. Furious, I shoved her away. She screamed and nearly lost her balance. Fortunately, Spencer was just in time to catch her. "Yvonne, how long are you going to keep this up?" As I looked at them both, the disgust almost made me gag. If it weren't for Zion telling me yesterday, I wouldn't have known that Shannon was now working as Spencer's secretary. I raised my chin and fixed my gaze on the diamond ring on Shannon's finger. With a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, I asked, "Honey, wasn't Shannon the student you sponsored? How did she end up working at the same company as you? Oh, is that diamond ring she's wearing the one you bought for her? The one that cost tens of thousands? It's nice." Spencer's colleagues around us shot disdainful looks at Shannon and whispered among themselves, "What's going on here? Is she Mr. Freeman's mistress?" "I think so. Who would buy a diamond ring for just a friend?" Spencer shot me a wary look and quickly shielded Shannon behind him. "Don't start making things up. You're just our housekeeper. Call security and have her thrown out." Housekeeper? I never thought Spencer could be this shameless. At his words, the others at the office began eyeing me with disdain. "So, she's just a housekeeper." Shannon's lips curled up into a smirk. "Yvonne, Spencer's just too kind, so he's been good to you. I didn't expect you to cause a scene at the office." I scoffed. "You've got it wrong. I didn't come here for Spencer. I came to see your CEO." Spencer looked at me in confusion before laughing. "Know your place, Yvonne. You think you can just waltz in and see Mr. Latham?" I met his gaze and said with a half smile, "Honey, I'm just trying to look out for you. You're working all those overtime hours but only making $3,000 a month. Doesn't that seem unfair? I'm going to talk to your CEO about this." Spencer quickly interrupted me, yanking me by the arm. "Everyone, back to work." He pointed to his head. "This person has some problems. I'll get rid of her right now." As he said that, he pulled me toward the door with force. "Stop." Just then, the door to the CEO's office opened and Zion walked out. "Nobody touch her." The moment I saw Zion, I felt a wave of relief. Despite all these years, he hadn't changed a bit. Zion looked at me and nodded briefly before asking with mock surprise, "What did you mean by that just now?" I pulled out my phone and opened a conversation from a month ago. There it was, Spencer's pitiful plea for help. "Yvonne, I didn't get promoted again. I'm just an assistant earning $3,000 a month. Can you cover the mortgage again this month?" I turned the screen toward Zion. "Mr. Latham, would you mind explaining this? 8 years at your company and my husband's still just an assistant. We're really struggling with the home mortgage and car loan." I pretended to be crushed by life's stress and sneaked a glance at Shannon. Her face was deathly pale. Zion frowned deeply. "Spencer is the manager of our business department, not an assistant." I dramatically covered my mouth and widened my eyes, as if I had just heard something utterly unbelievable. "What? Manager? How could my husband lie to me?" Shannon panicked like a cat on a hot tin roof as she fumbled for her phone. The other employees began whispering, "Mr. Freeman lied to his wife about making $3,000 a month. That's unbelievable. You really can't judge a book by its cover. Look at how generous he is with his secretary." Upon hearing the chatter, Shannon quickly slipped off the diamond ring Spencer had given her. Zion's sharp gaze sent everyone scattering, and I was invited into the CEO's office. Zion listened to my complaints with a stern face, but his eyes softened whenever they landed on me. Meanwhile, Spencer panicked and dared not look at Zion. Lowering his head, he muttered, "Mr. Latham, I'm really sorry. My wife and I had a small argument and she got a bit emotional." He plastered on a strained smile while signaling frantically at me to play along. However, I just stayed firmly seated. Zion didn't even acknowledge Spencer. Instead, he pointed to the messages on my phone. "You've been telling your wife you're an assistant after 8 years at the company." Shannon jumped in to cover for him. "Oh, Mr. Freeman didn't mean it that way. He was just being humble, motivating himself to aim higher. Isn't that right, Mr. Freeman?" As she said that, she shot Spencer a look. Spencer nodded vigorously. Yes, that's exactly it. It's how I keep pushing myself forward." I couldn't help but laugh. If he's already a manager, then why did he use company funds to buy you a $1,000 handbag, Ms. Lambert? The moment I said that, Zion and the company's legal department staff turned their eyes to Spencer in unison. Spencer's face turned ashen. "Yvonne Sinclair, stop making things up. You're just mad I didn't give you grocery money today, aren't you? I'll give you whatever you want. Just stop lying here." Didn't bother arguing. I played the audio recording from our previous video call instead. In it, Spencer clearly admitted that the money was the company's. He had transferred the money to Shannon, so she could post it and pay it back afterward. The evidence was irrefutable, leaving Spencer speechless. The legal team immediately began looking into the records, but after a thorough check, they couldn't find any trace of the alleged misuse. Feigning surprise, I turned to Spencer. "What? Does that mean that $1,000 was from our joint savings?" I clutched my chest like I was heartbroken. "How could you lie to me?" Zion slammed his hand on the desk in fury. "Spencer, While you may not have embezzled company funds, your conduct is unacceptable. From now on, you're being demoted to a sales associate with a base salary of $3,000. This takes effect immediately." Spencer stood there, dumbfounded. He pointed at me but was unable to form words. I ignored his theatrics and pulled out a photocopy of the title deed I'd prepared in advance. "Drop the act, Spencer." Spencer was completely caught off guard by the title deed. He probably thought I would just cry and beg him to come back. Then, he'd pretend to comfort me and everything would go back to normal. After all, that was how it had always been for the past 10 years. But not this time. I placed the photocopy of the title deed on Zion's desk. There, in clear print, was Shannon's name. Everyone in the room focused on me, some with pity, some with sympathy. Even Zion's expression darkened further. I felt utterly exhausted, mentally and physically. I took a deep breath and nodded slightly at Zion. "I'm sorry for the trouble, Mr. Latham." With that, I turned and started to leave. "Yvonne." Spencer rushed after me and grabbed my wrist tightly. "Tell Mr. Latham that we're just having a small argument. Tell him that the video is fake." His grip was so tight it was painful. I tried to pull away, but my tears betrayed me. They slipped down my face despite my efforts to stay composed. It had been 10 years. From college to marriage, we had been through so much together. I thought we knew each other best. I thought our relationship was unbreakable. But now, it seemed all of it had been nothing more than my wishful thinking. Zion quickly caught up and pulled me away from Spencer's grasp. "This is a workplace, not your home. If you don't want your job, then leave." I fought to hold back the tears and looked at Spencer one last time. "Spencer, that house was supposed to be ours. We worked so hard and saved up little by little for it. And yet you put Shannon's name on it. Are you even human?" But Spencer continued to make excuses. Shannon just graduated and needed a house for her residency. I was just helping her get settled in. Spencer Freeman. In a fit of anger, I raised my hand and slapped him across the face with all my might. "Even now, you're still lying. You used my money to support her studies. You spent my money on her, buying her a house and bags, even taking care of her. And now you're saying you did it just to help her get settled in." I put all my strength into that slap. Even the palm of my hand stung with heat. Some colleagues covered their mouths and laughed. "What does that mean? So Shannon was just a sponsored student. She's always flaunting her wealth. I thought she was some rich young lady living a life of luxury. Looks like something's going on between her and Mr. Freeman," a colleague commented. "His wife is already here, catching him in the act. There's definitely something between them." Shannon, stunned by the turn of events, burst into tears. "Yvonne, I'm grateful to you for sponsoring me, but I'm not the third party. Please don't accuse me like this. The house was always your shared property. What does it matter if my name is on it? Why are you so materialistic?" She was unbelievable. Of course, it didn't matter to her. She had gotten it so easily, after all. I sneered and pointed at her as I spoke clearly. "Since your parents never taught you what respect is, don't blame me for what's coming next." Without another word, I walked out of Lionette Group. My 10 years of love turned out to be a waste. As I left the company, Zion followed me quietly. I stopped and he looked at me. "Yvonne, why didn't you come to me all these years?" It was a question that made me feel guilty. After all, I was the one who had suggested we break up. When I found out that Zion was the heir to Lionette Group, I thought I wasn't good enough for him. He handed me a business card. "This is my friend. He's a top divorce lawyer in the city. Don't refuse, Yvonne. Let me help you. Please." I wiped my tears away and nodded. "Thank you, Zion. Thanks for helping me with this act to bring him down." Zion didn't ask any further questions and simply took me to a law firm. I sneaked a glance at him while he drove. I hadn't seen him since graduation. Now he had taken over his family's company and had become even more distant and unapproachable. "I thought you and Spencer were getting along well," he said, eyes fixed on the road. There was a hint of concern in his voice. "Are you sure about the divorce?" I hadn't expected Zion to know about my relationship with Spencer over the years. I gave a bitter smile and briefly explained the situation to him. When the car came to a stop, I handed him the prepared documents. Zion took them and started flipping through them. His brow furrowed deeper with each page. Suddenly, his veins bulged on the back of his hand. He slammed his fist on the steering wheel in anger. "That damn Spencer. I thought he'd treat you well, which is why I promoted him to manager. I never expected this. Don't worry. I'll help you. I'll make sure he ends up with nothing." A few days later, I received a call from my lawyer, Jeremiah Burnett. His voice was serious. "Ms. Sinclair, the case with your husband is a bit tricky. The county clerk's office confirmed that adding someone's name to the title during marriage requires your consent. If you weren't aware, they may have forged your signature. After a pause, his tone turned more intense. This involves illegal handling of marital assets and forgery charges. I rubbed my temples, feeling the weight of exhaustion wash over me. Follow the legal process. I just want to get this divorce over with as soon as possible. Don't worry. Leave it to me. Jeremiah's reassurance eased my anxiety. One day, as I left the office, I was blocked by a scruffy figure. It was Spencer. His face was covered in stubble, his eyes were bloodshot, and he radiated a sense of defeat. He grabbed my wrist and said in an almost pleading tone, "Yvonne, Shannon has already gone to remove her name from the title. Can you withdraw the lawsuit? Let's end this already." Disgusted, I shook off his grip, as though pushing away something filthy. "Are you here to plead on her behalf? You shouldn't have done this in the beginning." He stood there dejected with his head hung low. In a raspy voice, he asked, "Yvonne, what do you want so that you'll spare us? You want me to spare you?" I looked at him with disdain. "Well, I'm not an obsessive person. Just agree to the divorce, sign the papers, and walk away with nothing. We'll talk about the rest later." He suddenly lifted his head. Surprise flashed in his eyes before he lowered them again. Eventually, he agreed. Jeremiah worked quickly and uncovered Spencer's financial history over the past 10 years. His salary was considered marital property as well. What shocked me was the fact that his personal account had $1,000 in savings. Meanwhile, my account had only a few $1,000s. In the end, the court ruled that Spencer would walk away with nothing. The house and car were mine, and he also had to pay me back the loan I had repaid, totaling over $1,000. As I looked at the verdict, I didn't feel the joy or sorrow I had expected, only a sense of calm, as if everything had finally fallen into place. I quickly sold the house, which was full of bad memories, and bought a smaller apartment. Being alone didn't seem so bad. After the divorce, I chopped off my long hair, feeling as though I had finally shed a huge burden. The days that followed were filled with work, beauty treatments, and fitness routines. I transformed from a disheveled housewife with only Spencer on my mind into a sharp workplace elite. I accepted Zion's offer and joined Lionette Group, throwing myself into work. The promotion came faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, I was made the project director, though with one condition. I had to be stationed in Peterborough for a year. I agreed without hesitation. Leaving the city and breathing fresh air was exactly what I needed. A week before I was set to leave, Shannon updated her Instagram. In the photo, she was holding hands with a man. Both of them were smiling happily. The caption read, "Dreams come true." I zoomed in on the image, only to realize that the man wasn't Spencer, but Leo Sullivan, head of my project in Peterborough, and the client I'd be working with. The world really was small. Due to our connection, I was invited to Shannon and Leo's wedding. On the wedding day, I wore a black backless dress with delicate makeup and high heels that clicked softly as I walked in. When Shannon saw me, she showed no surprise. Instead, she walked toward me with a smug, contemptuous look. "Yvonne, you don't think ruining Spencer will hurt me in any way, do you?" She tossed her hair. Her gaze was full of triumph as she continued, "I'm not like you, stuck in one place for 10 years, only to be discarded in the end." Before I could respond, she raised her skirt and dramatically fell backward. "Ah!" Everyone turned to look. Pointing at me, Shannon shouted hysterically, "Why did you push me?" Then, with a mocking glance, she whispered, "This is what you owe me. I want you to lose this client. I want you to end up as miserable as Spencer." I couldn't help but laugh in frustration. Even now, she was still trying to slander me. Leo rushed over when he heard the commotion. He quickly helped Shannon up. "What happened, Shannon?" Shannon, with tears filling her eyes, looked at me pitifully. "I don't know what I did. She pushed me as soon as she arrived." Just then, Zion walked up behind me. "What's going on?" As the CEO of Lionette Group, Zion was invited as well. Following Shannon's gaze, Leo looked at me and then noticed Zion standing behind me. He quickly let go of Shannon's hand. A look of surprise crossed his face. "Mr. Latham, M.S. Sinclair, you've finally arrived." Shannon looked on in disbelief. She tugged at Leo's hand, but his eyes remained on me. "M.S. Sinclair is an educated woman and my most trusted partner. It must be a misunderstanding." Shannon's plan was definitely misfiring. She had no idea that Leo was an old business partner I had worked with at my previous company. He had once pursued me relentlessly, but I had turned him down many times since I was already married to Spencer. Leo looked me up and down with appreciation. "Mr. Latham, M.S. Sinclair, why don't you go inside and take a seat? The wedding is about to begin." I glanced at Shannon and noticed her flushed face. As the wedding started, Shannon walked down the aisle with a man, but the guests suddenly became restless. They whispered while pointing at the big screen. The moment Shannon looked up, her face turned ashen. She screamed, "Turn it off! Turn it off!" Frowning, Leo turned, only to find Shannon's explicit photos. Ignoring the fact that her wedding dress was dragging on the floor, Shannon ran toward the screen. Even after she tripped and fell hard, she gritted her teeth and got back up. She reached the screen and desperately tried to cover it, but it was futile. Leo's expression changed drastically. He stared at the screen in disbelief as his lips trembled. Before he could recover, a figure burst from the crowd. He shoved past the guests in front of him and made a beeline for the stage. It was Spencer. Upon seeing him, Shannon scrambled to Leo's side and cried out, "Honey, let me explain. It's all fake. It's AI generated. Someone's trying to frame me. I would never betray you." Spencer didn't seem to notice me. He pointed at Shannon and shouted, "I've spent so much on you over the past 8 years. Now you've ruined my marriage and you think you can run off with my money. No way." I almost couldn't contain my laughter. Spencer, who used to be so stingy with me, now had to walk away from the divorce not only with nothing but also owing me over $1,000. There was no way he would swallow that bitter pill easily. Shannon clung tightly to Leo's arm. "Don't listen to him. He's just trying to ruin me because he couldn't get me." Spencer suddenly scoffed. "Who's really the lar here? Is the guy next to you really your father? You're an orphan." The men beside Shannon immediately bolted away in fear. It hadn't been very long since my divorce from Spencer, and they were already at each other's throats. Leo shook off Shannon's hand and looked at Spencer. "What is he talking about?" Shannon suddenly remembered me and pointed at me sitting in the audience. "It's her. That man is her husband. They're teaming up to slander me." Leo frowned when he heard this. Without a second thought, he shoved Shannon aside. "I've known Ms. Sinclair longer than you have. She's not that kind of person." I nodded toward Leo, showing my gratitude. Honestly, even though Leo had pursued me before, I didn't expect him to take my side in this situation. It seemed like his feelings for Shannon weren't as strong as I had imagined. Only then did Spencer finally notice me. He froze for a moment, then pointed at Shannon and said to me, "I was just sponsoring her studies. She's the one who seduced me." The scene erupted into chaos, with the guests whispering and pointing. Leo's face turned a deep shade of red. I guessed he had never been this embarrassed before. He forced a smile and announced to the crowd, "The wedding's called off. Everyone, just enjoy the food. Enjoy." He then ushered us into the lounge. In the lounge, Shannon was still insisting she was being framed, but Spencer wasn't letting her lie anymore. He pulled out all the transaction records from the past 8 years, everything from small amounts to tens of thousands of dollars. It even included the number of times they went to a hotel together. Callio frowned as he looked over the records. "Shannon and I rushed into marriage. We only knew each other for 2 months. If it wasn't for her saying she was pregnant," Spencer laughed. "Pregnant? She told me the same thing 8 years ago. Turns out it was a lie." My heart sank. That was the year I had my miscarriage. So he had been betraying me even back then. Spencer immediately realized he had said too much. His gaze flickered and he stammered, "Yvonne, I'm telling the truth. She's the one who seduced me. I didn't want to be irresponsible." He reached for my hand, but I stepped back, avoiding him. "Enough," I said coldly. "I'm only here for Mr. Sullivan's sake. Anything beyond that is none of my business." Suddenly, Shannon grabbed a tissue box and hurled it at me, screaming, "Yvonne Sinclair, stop pretending to be virtuous. If you hadn't caused a scene at Lionette Group back then, we wouldn't be in this mess." As the tissue box flew toward me, Zion stepped in front of me to shield me. Meanwhile, Spencer angrily shoved Shannon to the ground. "You're the one who seduced me. You're the one who wronged Yvonne first." He pointed at Shannon, furious. "If Yvonne hadn't spared you, you'd have been arrested by now." I didn't want to be involved in this mess, so I turned to Leo. "Mr. Sullivan, this is your family matter. I won't involve myself further." Leo's face turned pale. He sat on the couch and scoffed. "We haven't registered our marriage yet, so it's not really a family matter." He shot a disgusted look at the shrinking Shannon. "Get out." Shannon fell to her knees at his feet, crying, "I really am pregnant. You can take me to the hospital if you don't believe me." Leo waved his hand dismissively. "How do I know it's mine? Get out." Spencer roughly grabbed Shannon. "You sold the bags and jewelry I gave you. Give me the money." Shannon struggled against him. During the scuffle, she was pushed into the wine cabinet. The heavy iron wine rack collapsed, burying her under broken bottles and spilled red wine chaps. The sound of shattering glass was followed by an eerie silence. Upon hearing the commotion, hotel staff rushed in, and the sight before them caused them to gasp in horror. They quickly called. Then, a faint cry for help came from beneath the toppled rack. "Help, help me," it was Shannon. The staff scrambled to move the shelves, and the scene before them was chilling. Shannon's legs were twisted and deformed, and her face was covered in shards of glass. There was blood everywhere. Leo cursed under his breath and quickly directed them to get her to the hospital. Meanwhile, the surveillance footage revealed that Spencer had pushed the rack over. He was soon arrested by the police, who arrived shortly after. That evening, I received a message from Leo. "Sorry, I hope tonight's events didn't scare you too much." I replied politely, "No, I'm fine." A week later, Leo and I met again in Peterborough. He lit a cigarette and slowly said, "That woman miscarried that night. Even if the child was mine, I wouldn't want it. Her legs were broken. Even if they're repaired, she'll only be able to sit in a wheelchair from now on. And her face, it's too horrific to look at." He took a drag of his cigarette, then continued, "Spencer's previous company found out he was involved in cooking the books and embezzling a lot of money. They've already filed a lawsuit against him. Along with the charge for assault, he'll be spending some time in jail." I nodded and calmly replied, "They brought this on themselves." Just then, I felt a jacket drape over my shoulders. Zion's gentle voice followed, "Yvonne, we're getting engaged next month. Don't work too hard." I took a sip of my coffee. The bitter taste spread across my tongue. It was bitter, but I felt a sense of happiness.